Hey everybody, thought I'd offer my thoughts on WWE Superstars from September 16th, as well as TNA Xplosion from September 15th. This is your recap of wrestling's D shows. I'll go ahead and start with the latter. TNA Xplosion on September 15th. That kicked off with a lot of interviews, which really bored me to death. Great interview by Christy Hemme of Angelina Love. Love is actually really good on the mic. I wish she got more mic time where it didn't involve screaming or rolling around in the ring and trying to show her butt off. Angelina is actually a very talented wrestler and also very charismatic. So I was happy to see that the interview went off so well. That was followed up by a Dixie Carter interview, which took entirely too long, and I skipped almost all of. And then they interviewed Sarita before her match with Daphne. And Sarita, not very good on the mic. That is not one of her strengths at all. But by this point in the show, I was extremely tired and starting to wonder if there actually was matches on Xplosion. Now, they actually kicked off the show advertising that there would be matches. And I was at that point starting to think maybe they had lied. Maybe Jeremy Borash was a complete liar, or Taz thought that would be a funny joke. I'll get to Taz in just a second. But they also then recapped TNA Spin Cycle, which is an online segment. So that was pretty dull as well. That's usually a fairly entertaining segment on their website, but not something I want to watch on an actual show. Speaking of Taz, I made special note of this. I wanted to point out that during the two matches that did actually eventually take place on Xplosion, Taz was a complete and total loser. He has turned into the very thing he said he was not when he was working in the WWE. He's a total joke box now. He thinks everything he says is funny. He only says the cheapest and easiest joke he can come by. He's not insightful. He does not analyze matches. And he's off track, off topic all the time. What does that remind you of? Jerry Lawler from about 8 years ago. Taz and Lawler actually had a heated shoot argument during a WWE pay-per-view, WWE Survivor Series, I believe it was, a few years ago. Those two got into it to the point where the production staff and Vince McMahon had to step in and make sure it didn't happen in future broadcasts. Taz made a lot of good points when that happened about how Taz likes to analyze and call moves, and Lawler likes to point out people's boobs and yell puppies. Well, that's all Taz does now. Taz only points out the women and their physical features as opposed to calling moves. While Jeremy Borash tried to right the ship during this broadcast. It was really frustrating listening to Taz respond to questions like, "What do you think? What do you think Daphne should do here against Sarita?" And Taz's answer being, "Well, he should definitely get behind her if he was wrestling her." Just really bad sexual innuendos, really bad puns, things like that. Taz really kills TNA announcing now, and I'm really tired of listening to him. I thought it would be a great thing for him to jump over to the TNA ship, but it has really hurt. I actually at sometimes kind of wish Don West was still around, just because he never got off topic the way Taz does, and he actually never got in the way of allowing Jeremy Borash or Mike Tenay as far as calling matches goes. As far as the two matches on TNA Xplosion, the first one was Sarita taking on Daphne. These two had a very long match. I was impressed with how much time they were given. Sarita winds up winning here. Sarita's now being pushed as a heel. Basically, she's been scorned by Taylor Wilde. That seems to be the problem in the women's division, is women are scorning each other and creating heat with each other. It's very childish, a very cheap way of telling stories. But Sarita is upset, so she's fighting dirty now. She beat Daphne. Daphne looked great in this match. I have to say Daphne is one of their top talents in the women's division. But Sarita looked okay. Her offense really doesn't do a lot for me. I didn't really like her as Sarah Stock in Shimmer either. Sarita's just not really something that gets me excited when I'm watching a match. Her offense is kind of dull, and her character very predictable, very boring. Not a lot of charisma in the ring or out of it. So, but the match was very long, and if you like women's wrestling, it's definitely something worth checking out. And then the main event of the show was Angelina Love in a non-title match against Madison Rayne. They had a much shorter match. Madison Rayne really doesn't look that good in the ring. She looks very green. I know she has far less ring experience than Angelina Love, but I'm surprised Rayne has gotten so far in this division despite her lack of talent when there's so many other women on the TNA roster who have leaps and bounds surpassed her or have stayed ahead of her as far as her talent level goes, wrestling-wise. But Angelina Love picked up the win in this one. The crowd was really into this match, which was good for both of them, but really not a whole lot to critique there. Love pretty much owned this match. Let's jump over to WWE Superstars. Their D show on the 16th of September was kicked off with Santino Marella and Vladimir Kozlov taking on the Usos. We had this ongoing love-hate interest, whatever you want to call it, between Santino and Tamina. I always forget her name. Tamina, the manager of the Usos. Really disgusting, side story they have. Nobody's interested in a guy with a unibrow hooking up with the least attractive diva on the roster, but they insist on pushing this love story because it's funny. Well, I did point out, though, in my notes, I wanted to bring this up, the fact that I actually completely forget Vladimir Kozlov is even on the WWE roster most of the time, let alone in a tag team that's actually getting a lot of wins, albeit on Superstars. This team actually picks up a lot of victories, and I forget Kozlov even there. I mean, this was a guy who was main eventing with Triple H not too long ago, and here he is fighting the Usos and tagging with the comedy wrestler with no actual talent. So it just sucks to be Kozlov, but Kozlov is awful on offense. He really just almost injures everybody he faces anyway. This match was really boring. Kozlov got some offense in. He really went over in this match. The Usos look like crap. Now, the way they're being booked, they just look like idiots. And then they had Santino teaching Tamina how to do the Cobra. That was just really bad television. Moving on, Great Khali took on Primo in a battle of Giant versus Tiny. Primo came out with AJ, and I gotta say, AJ, not really digging her character on NXT, but she's hot, and I think she would make a great valet for one of the other wrestlers. I don't know about her ring skills yet, and I really don't like the character they presented on NXT for her, but at this point, I will say AJ is probably one of my favorites from that pool of divas they're going to choose from. But Primo got a lot more offense in this match than I expected. They actually built this a little bit better than I would have predicted, considering Khali easily, and a couple of years ago, would have gone into this match and just completely squashed Primo. Instead, Primo got a lot of punches in. He outsmarted Khali a couple of times, but Khali overpowered him and picked up the win. Serviceable match, but really nothing worth checking out. Main event of Superstars was MVP versus Luke Gallows. They had a bit of a back and forth on the microphone before this match. Gallows is now independent of SES. He is on his own. He's looking for a new gimmick. MVP tried to offer him some ideas. Gallows and him wound up fighting. MVP winds up picking up the victory in this one. Gallows looked okay in this match. MVP actually did most of the carrying, though. I was surprised to see MVP in a role where he had to carry his opponent, and I thought MVP actually did pretty well in that role. The other thing I did want to point out, Matt Stryker made a hilarious comparison between Luke Gallows and Matt Geiger. I love Matt Stryker on the mic. The wealth of knowledge that he draws from when he's calling a match. He can call from pop culture, sports, real sports, professional wrestling history. He just comes at you at all angles, and I love it. So MVP over Gallows in the main event on Superstars was an okay match. They got a decent amount of time, too, which was good for both of them. But really, both these shows had nothing worth absolutely checking out. So I would say avoid both these shows at all costs. Don't waste your time. That's an hour and a half of your life that you can definitely use on something else.